Next question is: a DevOps engineer is writing an AWS CloudFormation template to stand up a web service that will run on Amazon EC2 instances in a private subnet behind an ELB application load balancer. The engineer must ensure that the service can accept requests from clients that have IPv6 addresses. Which configuration items should the engineer incorporate into the CloudFormation template to allow IPv6 clients to access the web service? A. Associate an IPv6 CIDR block with the Amazon VPC and subnets where the EC2 instances will live. Create route table entries for the IPv6 network. Use EC2 instance types that support IPv6. And assign IPv6 addresses to each EC2 instance. B. Replace the application load balancer with a network load balancer. Associate an IPv6 CIDR block with the virtual private cloud, VPC, and subnets where the network load balancer lives, and assign the network load balancer an IPv6 elastic IP address. C. Assign each EC2 instance an IPv6 elastic IP address. Create a target group and add the EC2 instances as targets. Create a listener on port 443 of the application load balancer, and associate the newly created target group as the default target group. D. Create a target group and add the EC2 instances as targets. Create a listener on port 443 of the application load balancer. Associate the newly created target group as the default target group. Select a dual stack IP address, and create a rule in the security group that allows inbound traffic from anywhere. Correct answer is D. Next question is: a security team is concerned that a developer can unintentionally attach an elastic IP address to an Amazon EC2 instance in production. No developer should be allowed to attach an elastic IP address to an instance. The security team must be notified if any production server has an elastic IP address at any time. How can this task be automated? A. Use Amazon Athena to query AWS CloudTrail logs to check for any associate address attempts. Create an AWS Lambda function to disassociate the elastic IP address from the instance, and alert the security team. B. Attach an IAM policy to the developer's IAM group to deny associate address permissions. Create a custom AWS config rule to check whether an elastic IP address is associated with any instance tagged as production, and alert the security team. C. Ensure that all IAM groups are associated with developers do not have associate address permissions. Create a scheduled AWS Lambda function to check whether an elastic IP address is associated with any instance tagged as production, and alert the security team if an instance has an elastic IP address associated with it. D. Create an AWS config rule to check that all production instances have EC2 IAM roles that include deny associate address permissions. Verify whether there is an elastic IP address associated with any instance, and alert the security team if an instance has an elastic IP address associated with it. Correct answer is B. Next question is: a DevOps engineer is developing a deployment strategy that will allow for data-driven decisions before a feature is fully approved for general availability. The current deployment process uses AWS CloudFormation and blue/green style deployments. The development team has decided that customers should be randomly assigned to groups, rather than using a set percentage, and redirects should be avoided. What process should be followed to implement the new deployment strategy? A. Configure Amazon Route 53 weighted records for the blue and green stacks, with 50% of traffic configured to route to each stack. B. Configure Amazon CloudFront with an AWS Lambda at Edge function to set a cookie when CloudFront receives a request. Assign the user to a version AORB, and configure the web server to redirect to version AORB. C. Configure Amazon CloudFront with an AWS Lambda at Edge function to set a cookie when CloudFront receives a request. Assign the user to a version AORB, then return the corresponding version to the viewer. D. Configure Amazon Route 53 with an AWS Lambda function to set a cookie when Amazon CloudFront receives a request. Assign the user to version AORB, then return the corresponding version to the viewer. Correct answer is C. Next question is: a company is testing a web application that runs on Amazon EC2 instances behind an application load balancer. The instances run in an auto-scaling group across multiple availability zones. The company uses a blue/green deployment process with immutable instances when deploying new software. During testing, users are being automatically logged out of the application at random times. Testers also report that, when a new version of the application is deployed, all users are logged out. The development team needs a solution to ensure users remain logged in across scaling events and application deployments. What is the most efficient way to ensure users remain logged in? A. Enable smart sessions on the load balancer and modify the application to check for an existing session. B. Enable session sharing on the load balancer and modify the application to read from the session store. C. Store user session information in an Amazon S3 bucket and modify the application to read session information from the bucket. D. Modify the application to store user session information in an Amazon Elastic AKE cluster. Correct answer is D.